Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly. Coming from this hastily built thing, I want to look like a coffee shop, which will be, well, it's going to be under construction for the next few years, but the plan is to call it Cafe with Soul. Get it? Because, well, anyway, if you can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more wild coverage, and catching me where I'm live. The Midnight Beta is coming in less than 2 weeks. On November 11th, plus whatever downtime ends up happening, Midnight will transition into the beta. Reportedly, invites have already gone out, so if you haven't seen an email, great, but safety first, don't click on any links inside. By the time the 11th rolls around, check your client in case an update is available to download the beta. Quick reminder, this is only the beta and not the early access for player housing, which will happen December 2nd with the 11.2.7 patch on live servers. At least that's when all that stuff is expected. What happens in beta will stay in beta. It's not going to follow you through to live realms. It appears the beta is going to open up in 2 stages, as some features haven't still been testable yet. The first week will include pretty much everything we've seen in the alpha, from the full leveling experience to the endgame campaign, the dungeons and delves and prey feature, the Argentina, housing, including endeavors apparently, and more. The second week will include more updates and new testable content. So this will include higher tier delves, the updates to the transmog system, the start of Raid and Mythic Plus testing, and on the housing front, Night Elf and Blood Elf exteriors. Now, to that last part, I question whether these exteriors will be available during housing early access. Like, it would be nice to have more than one option available by December. I want to talk about this for a second. Like, if you're considering whether you should go as far as pre-purchasing the Epic Edition for Midnight just for the beta access, I urge you to consider what you want to get out of the beta. If not for being a content creator, the value I would get from the beta is limited to mostly housing. Like, I know I'd want to get used to the controls, I would want to shop around for the perfect plot if I happen to miss the test on the PTR. Most everything else, though, it's not really set in stone. Classes can always change and be rebalanced. Raid and encounter mechanics, those can get adjusted, but housing, it introduces a few new kinds of decision-making to World of Warcraft. New kinds of collections and a canvas to create we haven't had before, not to mention these new controls to get used to. And early access is in just a month too, which only requires any kind of pre-order, so it's going to be up to you. Before we continue, we've got to make room for the sponsor of today's video, boot.dev. It's a site that teaches you how to code in Python and SQL and more in the most gamer way possible. Dopamine hits. Yeah, so what happens is you choose between like all these different courses, whatever you want. I know nothing about nothing, so I first chose to learn how to code in Python. From the basics, you learn the foundations of coding, building XP, and actual knowledge to take on more challenging lessons. The hits that I'm talking about are these little celebrations you get when you get stuff right. You gain experience and achievements, you build streaks, and you get items and currencies to spend. There's a leaderboard showing you everyone completing stuff you haven't even started yet, and, well, boot.dev makes it fun and maybe a little addicting to learn how to code, and this can open up new opportunities to grow in real life. Of course, there are costs, there are options, and by going through me, there's a discount. Go to boot.dev and use code SoulSoBreezy to get 25% off the annual plan. So try it out. If you're not happy within 30 days, you get a full refund, so do yourself a favor and see what you can do for you. For now, we're still in the alpha, and this week introduced the 5th and final phase. There are a few important bits that got folks talking though. First was a much needed adjustment to the core limits in housing. Outdoor budgets haven't changed, and the devs have shared the challenges they face with placing outdoor decor, notably with the lighting. But indoor budgets for a level 1 house is triple from the previous build, and a level 5 house budget is double the previous build. So it's basically more budget early on. What we don't know is how this affects the other levels in the long term. For all we know, the final budgets Blizzard has planned at the end of this whole leveling track, which we don't even know yet, maybe they never changed, and the only thing being adjusted are these earlier levels, which, that's fine by me. It keeps players happy today and will save our energy for future outcry. With more players getting their hands on housing, the impressions have continued to sound mostly good. At the same time, it's starting up new conversations about what folks expected from housing and how they're disappointed with how we progress into it, namely the leveling system. First though, I want to make a correction from a previous video. I made some incorrect calculations on room costs and identifiers, and I said in the video that this room layout you see in this screenshot, this is from the virtual housing tour, that this here is a medium-sized room. That's incorrect. It's actually a small-sized room displayed here. On screen is a comparison of the small and medium-sized room, which, in my opinion, is pretty darn big. Once again, here's the cafe using this medium square layout, and it's actually bigger than what it shows here because I put up a whole set of walls back there to make a hallway that transitions into other rooms like a living area. But anyway, back to this housing progression. In other games with housing, players will encounter situations where they buy like a starter home, and then they buy a bigger home if and when they want space. Sometimes they can keep the old home, other times it replaces the old one, and in some cases there are premium homes bought with real money. For the most part, once you have it, you can then build and place however you like, and that covers, not all, but it covers most housing-based games. World of Warcraft, like any other game, does some borrowing and also takes some different approaches, like making the starter home very accessible for everyone. In fact, it's pretty much free. Instead of saving up tons of gold to buy a brand new and bigger home or a lot, or spending it on upgrades, we progress our agency through levels and we build extensions, which is a trade-off of our efforts. It's kind of both a blessing and a curse. In fairness, the new starting numbers are very generous, and the medium-sized room, I'll show you this again, it's unlocked almost straight away. But there's been some grumbling from players that it feels odd knowing that as they play with housing and get more budget and layout options, they feel like they might need to end up starting from scratch again and rethink their dream house to reflect this new capability. I guess another way to put it, they don't want their limits to be time-gated, because that's kind of what's happening. And, I kind of get that. So it doesn't surprise me that some have suggested that they'd be happy to just pay a premium to fast track to max level just so they can have, at the very least, the layout of their dreams right away. Now, I know I can run my mouth, I've been running my mouth, but I don't want to carry on about why I disagree with that particular take. In fact, I invite you to respond to that if you agree or disagree. I do want to share my approach though, like my concept of a plan, as we're now like just a month away from early access. I'm going to say with confidence that we'll be able to earn a few housing levels, which will give us a pretty good starting budget to work with during early access. My plan is to use this time to mostly set up the cafe as like a glorified welcome mat into me as a player. So that's going to be my approach. It's going to be less about making character rooms and more like these expressions of my World of Warcraft career and some fun, random, sometimes personal stuff. So it's like, hey, come on in and enjoy the homage to my favorite beverage, along with some vibes and spaces to lounge and reminisce a few select memories from my time in game. And then behind the curtain, all my works in progress, like a sanctuary of shields, tons of shields if they ever get around to that. Eventually, sure, I'll make a living area or a space set aside for professions, whether it's functional or to just have a cool engineering looking room. And somewhere, tucked away in some secret passage, we'll have a secret control room where I control my giant cannon because, hey, remember, I want my exterior to be more like a giant gun than a house. So my plan is to build one major room space at a time. As I level and can build the layout and set up new spaces, hey, that's great. And then I'll start filling out the details as I obtain more items and increase my budget. I mean, after all, this is World of Warcraft, dudes. I don't need to have a complete home day one. Because, for the past 21 years, I've been Azeroth's murder hobo who sleeps standing up. I'm not going to lose it over not having everything I want at the very start. And let's be real, even if we were given all the budget and space Blizzard intended from the start, it's almost guaranteed that at some point Blizzard's going to release some sort of fangled feature or an endeavor or a premium pack full of items that will inspire some level of rebuilding. Because I look at this whole thing like Legos. Sometimes it's time for something new and I gotta cannibalize the old build to make something new. But that's just my approach. It's my way of dealing with what's given. The question I have for you is, what's your plan? We also got to talk a little bit more about Prey, the outdoor system coming at midnight, and what people are saying now that it's testable in this build. The expectations weren't set very high even during its initial announcement, but it seems these first reactions are even stronger than before, even though Prey is almost exactly what Blizzard announced a while back. So what happened? When the expansion and Prey was first announced in August, gamers reacted with some skepticism. So, okay, it's an open world thing, it gives cosmetics, and it's optional. Many WoW gamers have a very binary take on features. It's like either totally useless or super mandatory, right? Shortly into the announcement, Blizzard clarified that there would be some gear to be earned and credit towards the Great Vault. So now, Prey was mandatory, at least until the gear was no longer viable. And these are very normal responses. Between then and now, though, came the Legion remix and a pretty polarized response to the heroic world tier mode. Some folks love that it makes outdoor content feel challenging, especially because of the payoff. People get massive experience and they get these immediate, permanent power gains that don't exist in live realms. An underlined common discourse we hear about outdoor world content that, for some people, it's too easy, and gamers want it to be at least hard enough to where they feel like they're using more than one or two abilities to defeat mobs, especially after collecting some gear. I noticed the commentary start to sort of merge together into a theory that Heroic World Tier, with its double or triple health and damage increases, was a beta test for Prey, and in numerous threads discussing the Legion remix, that theory would regularly come up. So cut to this week, and as it turns out, again, Prey is merely what Blizzard announced it would be, just a bit of spice on top of outdoor world content targeted to players who spend most of their endgame in that space. The expectations some of these players hyped up for themselves were shot down pretty hard. Some critics are saying it's not tough enough. Others are saying it's not rewarding enough to be relevant. It's the typical, if it's not made for me, it's not good for the game kind of rhetoric. There are other critiques and fears shared in this week's commentary that I want to at least address in more detail. Some are sharing concerns Prey is a timed system because the longer it takes to complete a hunt, a stacking affix would get too high, resulting in increased damage taken, and could potentially make it feel impossible to complete, forcing the player to reset the hunt and try again. But it takes some pretty extreme circumstances to make that situation true. In my coverage, I tested Nightmare Mode, the highest difficulty mode in the alpha, using a pre-made character with an item level lower than that of normal dungeon gear. And completing the hunt at this difficulty, it happens to award champion level gear. So it's a pretty big difference in, difficulty versus reward right now. It takes approximately 25 minutes of idle time to max out the debuff at 100% damage taken, and it's important to point out how to make this happen. During these 25 minutes, even if I'm idle, I'll be afflicted with debuffs I need to heal through, and I'll be ambushed by my target. Every time I fend off an ambush, I progress a little bit towards finding the target's final location, and when I do, all the debuffs that I built up clear out. No more ambushes happen, and I can take on the target. So I want to be clear, if I want to max out this debuff, I basically have to start the hunt, and then go to the zone, and then avoid doing any progress, and when ambushed, I need to let myself die. Now let's look at this from the other side too. Outside of keys, folks need to take a break from the action. The Prey debuffs will actually pause while not in the target zone, or if you happen to be in a rest area inside the target zone. At the moment, rest areas don't seem to work in the alpha, so hey, there's that. But there are specific activities designed to make ambushes happen faster. That way players don't have to feel like they have to kill random stuff in the zone in hopes of being ambushed. I guess the devs don't want hunts to feel like they're paced with pure RNG. When it comes down to it though, in general, if a hunt does feel too hard, we should consider that not everything should feel like it can just be rolled over right away as soon as we hit max level. If they make Prey too accessible, then we just end up circling back to this conversation of outdoor content feeling too easy. Personal take, I do think it's okay if the game tells us to come back later in the form of us being turned into a bloodstain on the floor. Back to the critiques though, I do get behind people when they say they want a toggle to make outdoor content a bit more challenging as opposed to just a temporary event, and Prey is not the answer these folks are looking for. I do think it's a start though, and one of the challenges Blizzard faces is they don't want outdoor content to be split into like these two modes and separate players. It works in the remix as this temporary event with an entirely different feel of progression, but again, I think Prey is a good step in a better direction if nothing else. And that's the show. Okay, well, not really. There are some small items I wanted to at least bring up from this week's alpha. Tier tokens have been revealed, and the approach this time is pretty plain and simple. It's just organizing tokens into armor types. I'm not sure what the intent here or if this is an improvement. I mean, these days, thanks to the Catalyst, the journey to completing a tier set is almost meaningless. And yes, the Catalyst is coming back. In fact, here it is. It's this very huge thing that you can't miss. One of the other additions to housing was this skybox room. It's almost exactly what I was asking for in previous commentary. It doesn't seem done yet. There's only one entrance, so folks looking to have this kind of outdoor courtyard vibe before entering the home, we're not quite there yet, and the room is, well, it's just buggy overall. Still, it creates potential for designers to create outdoor illusions without having to use a bunch of pieces to obscure the walls or the ceiling. Another housing test came and went, this time focused on creating guild neighborhoods. The functionality of neighborhood management, though, it was very limited to the point where I'm a bit scared where they're at. We can make the neighborhood, and guildmates can join, that is, as long as they didn't already build a house in a different neighborhood, but, they couldn't move. Bugs aside, though, my concern is that I wasn't able to find anything about neighborhood management. Maybe I missed something, but I failed to find a UI that lets me do things like kick people off houses or facilitate changing the neighborhood into different types. And the other week, I talked about some data mining strings hinting at some added functionality that either won't make it or is just not in there quite yet. Their intent here was to try and stress test guild neighborhoods and fill them up to see if more layers would be created, and I'm not sure if this was a good test, as in, I don't think they planned it right. I think what Blizzard should have done was have their own guilds, they could make their own guilds and disable guild creation for the testers. And then Blizzard would invite as many players to these Blizzard guilds as they can and try to push the neighborhood layer system that way. Because it's not like guild leaders had much to test anyway, outside of the basics of setting one up. But hey, I haven't done QA for almost 10 years now. What do I know about writing test instructions? Next week, though, is going to be very interesting, even if there are no more alpha phases and beta is still coming like the week after or so, because the Legion Remix enters phase 3 with Broken Shore and Legion Assaults and the Tomb of Sargeras and that one dungeon that I think I've done no more than 5 times like ever. This is the phase where players can hopefully earn class mounts, and we'll find out what, if anything, they do with Deliverance Point on the Broken Shore. That's the spot with the rotating events and zone buffs and the Mage Tower, so we'll just have to see what we get. For now, let's wrap things up with a very big thanks to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video, and of course, the folks who are watching me live this week. It was a lot of fun finally doing the QR code experiment, which turned out pretty successful. So let's hope they add the report decor option for the interior like they have for the exterior. To our friends over in Patreon, thanks for the support, of course. And then there is you, viewer. You made it to the end. You fed the algorithm. So if you don't mind, please like this video. That helps a ton. Subscribe for more WoW coverage. Catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.